Tom Beers, the fellow that originated the show, is a good friend of mine. This sort of thing. I've been to tons of auctions, farm sales, estate sales, but anyways, that's how it unfolded for me.
Storage Wars didn't just disappear. Something happened behind the scenes that left fans stunned. For years, viewers believed the hit series was exactly what it appeared to be.
Stop it! Oh, really? Come on. The camera's right there. The
You
camera's
put
right
your
there.
hands on him, so get the...
Chaotic auctions, ruthless bidders, and hidden treasures buried inside abandoned lockers.
Damn. Oh my God. We could be talking to mother.
But after insiders uncovered a shocking problem tied to the show, everything suddenly changed. Now, fans are demanding answers as rumors continue spreading online. So what was really discovered behind the scenes of Storage Wars? And how did one of reality television's biggest success stories suddenly begin falling apart? Join us as we uncover the shocking discovery that changed Storage Wars forever. The end no one saw coming. Before 2010, America had its fair share of reality shows, dominating the reality television space like nothing else could ever really challenge them. But on December 1st, 2010, the A&E network took a chance on Dan and Laura Dotson, launching a show on auctions. As expected, the reactions were loud. But Tom Beers, the executive producer of the show, had one vision, one goal. He wanted to dominate reality television, and Dan, with Laura, had the chance to take television by storm. Who in their right mind would set up a show about auctioning lockers? Who will pay them any attention? The lockers were old, dusty, filled with secrets, and had almost no hints at all. It was a game of luck, pride, and prejudice. The stakes were high. Dan's voice was loud, calling the shots. His speech was rapid, and he had his feisty Laura by his side to keep the ship sailing as smoothly as possible. But will that be enough to start up a show? Although Dan and Laura were the hosts, they were not exactly at the center of attention. Brandy Passante and Jared Schultz were the married package.
Come here, you. Hey, what?
Barry Weiss was the encyclopedic intellectual, and Dave Chester always had a yoop or two waiting in the wings, looking to explode during an auction, and just like that, their numbers kept growing. The network had never hosted a reality show that was as successful in its history. But once Storage Wars hit the mainstream market, it was a takeover. But here is where it gets intriguing. While the show was established as a new television niche to basically discuss auctions and watch the cast ensemble show share whatever they found with the audience, it transitioned into something more. Suddenly, fans started to pay more attention to the casts, their emotional turmoils, and the consistent rift that threatened to tear the show apart. The end was near, and some fans could feel it too. It wasn't long before the tensions backstage started to spill over to the screen. Brandy and Jared seemed to have lost their rhythm. Barry was leaving, and other familiar faces suddenly started to disappear. As expected, the show strategically hid the tension from some fans, and others just couldn't help but see past Don's rapid-fire auction style. It wasn't long before the prying started, and slowly but surely, fans made a shocking discovery that threatened to completely unravel the show. What exactly did they find, and how much did it affect the show? The truth about Barry Weiss. As much as Storage Wars emphasized the relationship between the cast ensemble as a familial type, sometimes the tension heats up and explodes in everyone's faces. But regardless of it all, Barry somehow always stood tall. Oh, he was perfect, a fan favorite.
Who do I want to win? The fans. Because I just wanted to put on a good show.
And a man who had lived a completely different life before television fame. For context, Barry was an entrepreneur. He ran a business with his brother, a successful wholesale produce company, for 25 years before retiring as a millionaire. But why exactly did a 59-year-old millionaire sign up for television fame? It was a long-standing question that had efficiently followed him around like a moth to flame during his time on the show. However, the fans rarely had any answers. How can a man so jovial, lighthearted, and a bit of a talker somehow never talk about his decision to come out of retirement and sign up for a television franchise? Weird, eh? But fans just couldn't seem to get enough of his cowboy aesthetic and his effortless display of opulence, coming to the show with a rotating collection of hot rods and vintage American muscle. The slick moves and the Rockin' N8 roll biker style had fans screaming his name, and he loved the attention. But is that why he was really doing it? Was he attention-deprived? Barry was never crazy about the attention. He wanted something else. He had always been a stickler for collecting items, especially antiques that time seemed to have buried far away. He lived for the thrill of the hunt and gladly shared the joy of his discovery. Although some critics believed that he just never really cared about the show, and he was just a man too rich to be bored and had too much energy to be idle. However, these claims just didn't stick. He simply had fans eating right out of his palm. But what happens when a man like that simply disappears? No interviews, no discussions, no social media posts, no PR, just a large wall of silence and troubled fans. It didn't take long before the circling sharks smelled blood in the water, and the rumors were visceral. One source reported that he had finally had his fill and possibly wanted to explore new things. Although to some fans, it seemed rather convenient that a man who hasn't spoken a word in his own defense is easily dragged into social media muck, others argued that it made sense. It was basic but understandable. He was never in it for the money. So what economic reasons did he really have to stay on the show? Dealing with all types of egos. The debate lasted for years, until 2017, when he chose to talk about it. He claimed that he had truly had enough of the show after its first 4 seasons, which is why he left in 2013. He suggested that he wanted to have a go at something else. Although the news split hairs, he made comebacks now and then. But it wasn't long before more familiar faces began to disappear without a trace, and the next name really had fans worried. The disappearance of Mark Balelo. While Storage Wars was indeed built around competition and family, especially with the cast ensemble from the first season, it was still a television show, meaning that it had certain needs. For context, it needed a bit more personality, some cast with a completely different vibe from what fans were already introduced to during the first season. Fast forward to the show's season, and Mark Balelo brought a whole new level of sleek. He was handsome, smart, stylish, and often came on the show with a team firmly behind him. It was almost like watching an episode of The Sopranos. However, Mark didn't come on the show in a desperate need for attention. He was self-made, owned a liquidation, wholesale, and distribution company, and an auction house. His presence commanded serious respect. However, Mark was no stranger to auction bids and multi-million-dollar businesses. He knew the stakes were high and competition was fierce. So he came up with a system that forced his competition on a warpath with him. To Mark, the most compelling side of business is showing the money. Outbidding the competition was a lot easier if he could feel such a huge amount of money in his man purse. It almost seemed like he had no problems, at least not one anyone could see. But on February 9th, 2013, the unthinkable happened. Mark was reportedly arrested at his business and was caught with a substantial dosage of methamphetamine and other controlled substances. He was due for a court hearing on the 19th day of the same month, with almost a certain possibility of conviction according to insiders close to him. It wasn't long before the rumors swirled. Is that where all the fancy suits came from? Is that why he dressed up in flamboyant mafia suits? The narrative was shaping up nicely, and he was not winning. Just 2 days after his arrest, he was found dead in his garage. He had reportedly inhaled an excess of carbon monoxide from his car's exhaust and chose to sit in it until he died from asphyxiation. And just like that, the franchise lost one of its own to self-harm. It was the first time, but fans had suspicions it might not be the last time they saw something like that. Were they ever proven correctly? The Daryl Sheets disappearance. As far as energy goes, there is no topping Daryl Sheets, and everyone in the Storage Wars universe knew at least that much. But Daryl wasn't just about energy. Like Barry, he was a very good strategist, and he had some serious knowledge about most antiques. But as smart as Daryl was, he also had a penchant for making random decisions. Sometimes they paid off with serious benefits, other times it was a large flop. But Daryl went big every time. He had a go hard or go home principle, so every time he locked in on a locker, he went hard. His trigger-happy fingers always made big bids on multiple lockers, and hoping for the luck of the draw wasn't really the easiest trend to follow. So in some sort of way, he was a whole new niche, and a huge section of the Storage Wars fan base loved him for it. Affectionately called the Gambler, Daryl seemed invincible on the show. His high-risk, high-reward approach seemed to mostly pay dividends, and that kept him in the business somehow without ever declaring bankruptcy. Although he sometimes faced criticisms from fans who watched on from the outside, he was not going to change an approach that had been working for him since he joined the show on its 2010 debut. His eccentric personality had him almost always in the center of it all. He mostly caught fans' attention with his stocky build, his directness, and that rugged American wardrobe. But a few years into the show, something shifted. Another member of the franchise, Dusty Riesch, claimed that he noticed a change in Daryl that he did not understand at the time. Daryl was just as good a salesman as he was a buyer, and he was especially popular for never settling for less. Somehow, he pushed for every cent on the dollar and made sure he wasn't making a loss. But this time, it was different. He set a $100,000 to $25,000 price for an estate collection, but when the buyer pushed further with a $50,000 bid, he simply took it with no questions asked. Although he wasn't the type, he was suddenly taking fewer chances, almost like a man pressed for time, and looking to make the most of what he had. Did the criticisms over the years finally get to him? Was he changing to fit into the more natural status quo? Fans were puzzled, uncertain, and lying in wait, unsure what they were waiting for. But it wasn't too long until Daryl suddenly left the show. Suddenly, there was more clarity. Daryl was truly fighting his demons, and staying on the show was not the best course of action for him. He had reportedly suffered a heart attack in 2019, but he survived, and that just sounded like classic Daryl. He was not the type to give up, but on April 22nd, 2026, Daryl was reported dead. The franchise flatlines, with some cast members picking up their broken partners. But it gets even darker. How does a man who lived his whole life taking chances on everything suddenly decide to shoot himself in the temple? That takes personality, conviction, and hopelessness. Fans wanted a reason. What would a man like that choose self-harm? What was he going through? What did his Storage Wars family do to mitigate the fall? Dave Hester's response to the unexpected tragedy. Maybe time does chisel memories of the past and sculpt new memories for some, but Storage Wars fans seemed unable to continue. Fans found it difficult to move on from these contentious disappearances. At first, it was the unexplained disappearances, but that cascaded into self-harm. Critics finally addressed the elephant in the room, the question no one ever really seemed to ask. What could these cast members really have been going through to resolve to unaliving themselves? Daryl's demise came as a great shock for most fans, especially because he was found grinning and in an upbeat mood just a few hours before his death. However, there was something else, something a little bit more disturbing for most viewers. Dave appeared to be completely shattered by this news, and that was puzzling for some fans. Daryl and Dave were opposite sides of the same coin. Cut out of the same competitive cloth, they often clashed heads over lockers and mostly never saw eye to eye on anything. But was that just limited to when they competed for the same lockers, or did it extend past the screen? Dave already had a reputation on the show that made him a bit of an anti-hero. He went for whatever he wanted, and almost always dived in recklessly, careless about whose feelings he was hurting. He was the perfect villain, and even the show hosts, Donna and Laura, were not spared from his persona. However, death seems to be a leveler that keeps the peace. Dave was indeed a menace, but according to him, he was just as lovable. To most fans' surprise, Dave claimed that he and Daryl were close even before the show. For them, the competition ended when the cameras stopped rolling. But when the cameras still rolled, and there was money to be made, both men always went for the jugular. And that was how they defined respect for each other. Dave claimed that the news of Daryl's demise broke the cast ensemble when they heard it. He claimed that he only found out when a television channel reached out to him, asking him to comment on Daryl's death. Although Daryl's shocking demise really set the wrong tone and sent the wrong message, Dave lashed out at fans and critics who found it imperative to invade their privacy just because they were television stars. Daryl might have sadly unalived himself, but Dave believed that cyberbullying led him to his death. Daryl had indeed claimed that he was being cyber-stalked and bullied by an unknown hacker, who reportedly told him he was going to ruin his life. Dave believed that the authorities should have done a much better job protecting Daryl, but they failed him, making them a part of the problem. Dave claimed that the situation changed him and had him talk to his son against ever thinking of self-harm as an option, as that would break him and his wife fatally. He claimed that Daryl could have taken the option of talking to somebody about his feelings rather than taking the extreme measures of a shot to the head. Although he discussed the continuity of the franchise even after Daryl's demise, fans had questions. Could this be the warning sign that it's all coming to an end? The drama that unraveled it all. Over the years, fans have responded to the painful disappearances, Jared and Brandy splitting apart, and, more recently, the painful demise of Daryl Sheets. However, fans made a shocking discovery about the reality of the relationships between the Storage Wars family, as Dave so gleefully called them. Sometimes the tension grows so thick you could cut it with a knife. Although many suggest it is a common occurrence between people who just don't know how to lose. But what happens when that descends into a physical brawl? Dave had always made it known how he felt about the auction really being designed on chances. In fact, he chose the legal approach in December 2012, claiming that the network rigged the game, using Dan and Laura to plant valuable items into specific lockers and sell them to a specific buyer. So in 2012, the show sacked him, and he sued them for wrongful termination and made legal claims that it was indeed rigged. But that blew over, and he was yet again accepted back on the show. Although the network did win in court, public opinion was shattered. Suddenly, the uncertainty that made the show into what it became seemed almost too good to be true. Some fans watched with more skepticism, and Dave was a public enemy to other fans, who claimed that he tilted the show towards a possible shutdown. But it gets even crazier when an argument that started as a simple battle of words escalated into a menacing exchange of blows between Don and Dave. Laura got involved, and Dave threw her onto the ground. To most people, it seemed like the show was finally ending, and a three-way brawl did seem like a probable cause. But the show never stopped. The hustle continued, and the grind did not end. But was it still the same old storage wars? Will fans ever see it the same way again? We may never know. The show was renewed for season 17 in late 2025 and has continued running until late 2026. But critics believe that it remains a possibility that the fans and the network cannot take brawls, unexplained disappearances, and now, yet again, another suicide. Whether the show is renewed by the network after the 17th season or shuts down completely, only time will tell. Do you think that A&E finally decided to stop the show? And is Dave Hester the reason the show started to lose its familial connection? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.